in this room. There are members who there are non-members of this committee who wish to observe the proceedings as well as possibly participate. They are connected to this meeting via Teams, and therefore during the meeting may well be that those members who are connected via Teams wish to ask questions, and quite obviously they will be provided with answers. So just make that clear so that those who are viewing are not confused as to what is happening. But all those members of the committee are in this room and ready and available to participate and vote if necessary. So first of all, I'd like to start with the apologies and substitutions. Dennis, would you like to deal with that, please?
Thank you. Councillor Abbott is substituting for Councillor Jackson. Councillor Brazil is substituting for Councillor Thomas. Councillor Long is substituting for Councillor Sweet. Councillor Reeve is substituting for Councillor Chang. And Councillor Rowe is substituting for Councillor Austin.
Thank you. So we have no other apologies. We don't have any apologies.
Apart from those, no.
Okay, thank you. Right, the next item is to approve as a correct record the minutes of the committee held on the 22nd of July 2021. Can I have a, can we show that these are approved, please?
I'll second it, Chair.
All those in favour? Yeah. Okay. Any against? No? Okay, thank you. There is no urgent business. Division of the agenda. If I could state that there has been an adjustment, or there isn't to be an adjustment to the agenda, in that item 7, which is the waste service update, which is a presentation by FC followed by questions and answers, that is being moved further down the agenda to just after item 12. That will be taken later in the agenda. It may be necessary to divide the agenda, but we'll deal with that as and when that arises. Public forum. Do we have any questions? No, there are no questions. Thank you. As I say, item 7 has been moved down the agenda. Item 8 is Southam's Citizens Advice Update. This is a report from Janie Moore, so over to you, Janie.
Oh, great. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Do you mind if I stand up?
Please do.
Okay, great. Just so I can see everyone then, nice to address you. So my name's Janie Moore. I'm the Chief Officer for Citizens Advice Southampton. And I wanted to thank you for inviting me here today. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what our charity does, how we've responded to the pandemic, and a brief look to the future, which I hope you will find interesting. And of course, my main aim is to ensure that the council continues to fund us. It's a crucial part of our funding model. So please, I would encourage you, if you do have any questions, please do ask, and I'll do my absolute best to answer them. If we could move on, thank you, to our first slide. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not actually that easy to see, is it? Which is what I tried to do here was take a snapshot. So with the blue lines are the snapshot of the advice that we're giving in January 2020. The orange ones are what happened in the pandemic. That's the first month of the pandemic when we went into lockdown. And then the grey one is what's happening right now. So that's what we saw in September. And I think it's quite interesting to look across the different areas of advice that we give and to let you know how that affected us and the advice needs of people within this part of the world. So the first column there is benefits and debt inquiries. This is always the biggest area of work that we have and where people come to us for the most help. And you can see there over the 3 periods an increase in demand for help with those kind of issues. And separately from that, the third cluster along is universal credit, which is listed separately because it was a relatively new benefit that was introduced. And the orange column there, you can see the demand for universal credit help absolutely peaked in March 2021, 2020 when the pandemic hit. And we were, all of our volunteer team had to really gen up really quickly on what help was available, not only around universal credit, but people facing furlough, unemployment, all sorts of uncertainty. And as you would expect, that has to drop back down to fairly normal levels now. What you can see for debt advice, which is the second cluster, it has peaked during the pandemic and is again back at normal levels. Around 15% of the inquiries that we deal with are around debt advice. We are massively expecting this to increase. You'll all be aware of the pressures that people are facing at the moment, and the sort of professionals, the MAPS, the Money and Advice Pension Service, are estimating that it will go up by 60% demand over the next 12 months. So we have got some trainees in place at the moment who are learning how to give debt advice because it is regulated by the FCA, and they're almost through their training, so we sort of feel like we are primed and ready for that surge. The fourth one, I can't even read it with my glasses, without my glasses on, is utilities and communications, and you can see there that numbers have declined, and I think this is an indication of people dealing with other issues rather than household bills, but unfortunately I'm pretty sure that's going to come up over the next few months. We've got housing issues there, which is the next cluster along, and you can see the grey bar on the end is the rise in housing issues that we are seeing right now this month in terms of people coming through our door and asking for help around the housing crisis that we're facing. Moving along again, I can't even read it. I can't read it on either one of these. Relationships, thank you. I thought this was really interesting, that actually during the pandemic, it actually dropped away in terms of people coming to us and asking for help. That's not to say that it wasn't important, it's just that people were focused on other issues, and now as we're coming out of the pandemic, they're sort of able to, we're all more able to move about more freely, then people feel that they can actually ask for that help, and potentially, talking about really difficult circumstances, maybe they can leave where they are. Thank you. I should have really touched on employment with universal credit. The two go hand in hand, and what we saw again in the middle of the pandemic was this huge effect where people were just so worried about where the next paycheck was coming from, and our volunteers and paid staff were able to respond to those queries in a really helpful way. And the last one I put on there was the health and community care issues, which again, as a percentage of what we deal with, it's a fairly small one, but what I think is interesting is the upward trend, and we're starting to see there that access to health and social care is becoming a bigger and bigger issue. People don't actually know where to go to get that help. So we have a Health Watch project where we can feed directly into a Health Watch champion and start to escalate those issues. And they, a bit like the way National Citizens Advice work as a national body to collate issues across England and Wales, Health Watch will do the same for health and social care matters. Okay, if I can ask you to move on to the next slide. So what I wanted to help explain, I suppose, was a little bit about the work that we do and how it actually helps individual people. There's lots and lots of numbers on this slide, and I was hoping that we'd be able to read through them. Hopefully it's clear enough. So what we're talking about here is the 2020 year, so from April 20 to March 21. People that we helped, nearly 4,500 people. They brought with them over 11,000 issues. And what we do, all the information on the pink, is when we help a client, we actually look at the financial benefit that brings that individual. And that figure is then, so if we help somebody claim housing benefit, for instance, then the weekly amount is multiplied by 52, and we just store that in our database next to the client's name. If we help write off some debt, then the amount of debt that we've helped them write off, again, is stored, and all that's added up. So the figure at the bottom, £1.99 million, is the value to our clients of the financial help that our organisation has generated for people in the South Hams over that 12-month period. The figures above it come from a Treasury model which extrapolates the work that we do. So they look at for instance, the savings to the local authority and say, well, if you helped 10 people who were potentially going to become homeless, but actually they didn't become homeless because of your intervention, and they assign a value to it. So the other figures are sort of created through the model rather than directly to clients. But it's convincing, it's Treasury approved, and if anybody is interested in looking at the stats behind that, then I can certainly go through that with you at any point. More importantly, really, than the numbers are the individual people that we help, and I just wanted to give a case study, just one example of somebody we've helped recently. So we'll call this lady Katie. She rents a fairly modern property from a housing association, and she lives with her partner and a 5-year-old daughter. She's currently signed off work because of some mental health issues, and her daughter has significant health issues, including incontinence. So Katie is already receiving various benefits. She gets PIP, New Start ESA and Universal Credit, and her partner works full-time. However, they have already accrued significant household debts, and they're managing these through a sort of repayment programme. However, the household costs are just as adding debt in month on month, and that's why she came to us and said, what can I do? We identified that energy as one of the key issues. I don't know what your energy bills are, but for this family in a 2-bedroom house, it was £2,000 a year for their energy bills. So we've got a specialist advisor. They actually walk the clients through the house. So in the old days, we would actually go and visit the property. Now we're doing sort of more like a video call. So shows the mould in the room, talk through your heating systems. Do you close that door on the way out? All this kind of sort of quite in-depth briefing. And through that, we identified that actually the electric shower was being used for an hour and a half a day by the 3 people in the house. And that was contributing £1,000 towards this energy bill that they're facing. And so through a real practical behavioural change, Katie and her family can reduce the length of their showers. They can potentially save themselves £1,000 a year. So that's one example of the way that we try and help people. And I just thought we'd give a bit of a flavour of some of the work that we do. So it has been a very challenging 18 months. I think we're all really familiar now. This is a hybrid meeting. We have our offices just over the way from you, and we operate a hybrid advice system. So we have some people coming into the office, but many of our staff and volunteers working from home. And that transition to home working that we did overnight when the pandemic was announced was a real success. There's more than 300 citizens advice offices across England and Wales. Ours was one of the only ones that never stopped serving our clients the whole way through. We literally had volunteers one day in the office, and the next day we had them picking up the phones from home. So we're really proud of that transition, and we're very pleased about the way that we've looked after and managed our staff and volunteer workforce through it, through this difficult time. But part of it has been through them. The teamwork and the sense of camaraderie is wonderful. And these guys here went out on a virtual walk of the UK and encouraged everybody within the organisation to start clocking the miles that they were walking each week. You could be walking your dog, you could go out on a special walk with your friend. And between us, we walked up to Land's End, from Land's End to John O'Groats and all the way back again. In about 5 weeks, it was absolutely phenomenal, but it just created that sense of teamwork and that sense of being part of something, which was really fulfilling, and it just gives people a sense of continuity within the organisation. The other successes that we've got there, Empower, Maps and Healthwatch, are all specialist projects that we run. Empower and Healthwatch cover big geographical areas. So Empower is run by this office, it's the South Hams office that runs it for Devon and Cornwall. Maps is a national project which we are a member of, and Healthwatch covers Devon, Plymouth and Torbay. So the Empower project is where our specialist energy advisors come in and do some of that work that I've already explained. Maps is a funded project where we have our debt trainees, and we're getting them trained up to be able to give debt advice. And Healthwatch, as I mentioned, enables people to resolve issues with the health and social care system that they're facing. And then the last bullet point there is we were very honoured to receive the Queen's Award for Voluntary Service. That was following a visit by Princess Anne, which we actually held here in this room a couple of years ago. And at that point, the Lord Lieutenant of Devon was sort of alerted to us and said, well, I think actually your organisation's pretty good. Had a look at what we do, they look at the way that we run in terms of the efficiency of our organisation. They spoke to volunteers about the service that we deliver, and they sort of talked to trustees to make sure that our governance was in place. Once they looked at all of those things, they were very happy to give us that award, which is the equivalent to an MBE for all of our volunteers, something we're very proud of. We had a lovely party out actually on the back here a couple of weeks ago, where the Lord Lieutenant actually came down and presented it to us. We should have been able to go to Buckingham Palace, but obviously through lockdown, these things haven't happened. Nevertheless, it was a lovely event. So, current challenges, where are we now? You will be very familiar with the local housing crisis. We do want to work more closely with the council on this. I think it would be an opportune time for us to really work collaboratively and to highlight the struggles that people are facing. I know I don't need to tell you what's going on, but it's worrying to see the pace of change and the fact that eviction rates are going up. People are coming to us on a much higher basis, more regularly with housing issues than they ever have done in the past. The energy crisis, that's going to affect us all. People, I don't know if you like myself, you've had to move energy providers really recently. I moved to Avro Energy and then they went bust 2 weeks later. So now I'm with somebody else, but we can expect to see a 30 or 40% increase in our household bills. And it will go up again in March. The price cap is only a 6-month sort of temporary hold. And so all of us will see our household prices. For the most vulnerable in our societies that are really living with low incomes, it's going to be incredibly difficult. We recently lost the £20 a week uplift for universal credit. For Devon, that represents £25 million on an annual basis. That's £25 million that's not in the local economy anymore. Significant amount of money. People will be really struggling. We've also sadly seen volunteer losses. So we used to have a workforce of around 70 volunteers. And like I said, we have done really, really well to maintain them in a remote working environment and to keep up the morale and everything. But after 18 months, it's inevitable. So we've lost 14 of those recently. And we now have a new training programme taking place. We've got 8 on the current one, and we're recruiting again for January. However, it takes quite a while for somebody to become upskilled in the advice that we give. And therefore, we are going to see a dip in our capacity to be able to serve people in the short term, which is something which just compounds the current situation, unfortunately. And the last one we've put on there is the community video booths. So some of you may have heard about those. That's where we partnered with local organisations through the pandemic and who are still operating under those very difficult circumstances. And our biggest success story is with the Dartmouth Hub in Tunstall, where they run a service every week. We set up a laptop, a dedicated laptop, you press a button and you get straight through to a citizens advice advisor. So because we've built really good links with that community organisation, they make quite frequent referrals in. But uptake across the South Hams has been much, much lower than we had hoped. So we're now setting out to make sure that we have that sort of personal connection with the community group, so that when they identify somebody who could maybe benefit from a bit of help from us, that they give them a nudge and a bit of encouragement to actually jump on the video booth and take part and get the questions that they need. So yes, some goods and some bads. How are we going to address all of these issues? Well, we have quite a rigorous, robust, I should say, business plan, which has got 5 different priorities. So in terms of accessibility, our aim is to be accessible to everybody. That's around meeting the needs of everybody within our community. So we're looking at age, we're looking at gender, we're looking at different ethnicities, but also looking at access points. And we know really that actually what people want is face-to-face help. When they're feeling really stuck and really down, it is getting back in front of somebody and talking through your problems in a sort of a safe and held way that really makes people feel better. So as soon as we can, we don't quite have a date on it yet, but we will be opening up our face-to-face services. In terms of being a local voice for local people, that's our advocacy arm. So we work locally to make sure that the social policy issues that people are experiencing are flagged up. And again, being part of the Universal Credit campaign was something we spoke to Anthony Magnell about. Unfortunately, he gave us a date, which was one day after he'd already voted in Parliament. But we have at least raised it with them, and we have had the opportunity to talk directly around the issues that we're seeing. In terms of being a great place to work and volunteer, that's us making sure that we do look after and continue to value the volunteers and the paid staff that give up their time to work with us, and make sure that we hold on to them. As I said, the skills and the knowledge they gain are hugely valuable to us. The next one is around being an efficient and effective organisation. We recognise that whilst we moved to home working really, really quickly, what we've done really inadvertently is piled system upon system upon system, and we've actually now ended up with layers of complexity, which are sometimes causing some of our workforce IT challenges or sort of frustrations in other ways. So what we need to do now, and we need to sort of consolidate what we've got, and go back through our systems and just make sure that they're working efficiently for us so that we can help the most number of people possible. And the fifth one there, is about being a sustainable organisation. It's a massive, broad brush statement, but it does literally mean that, being sustainable in every sense. So one of the things that we know is that younger people don't necessarily associate with our organisation, but over time we'd like to make ourselves more attractive to them so that they come to us as volunteers and they come to us as clients. And that in the long term will make us much more sustainable. It's also in terms of helping clients with their sustainability. So as we look and move towards eco homes, let's say, how will a low-income household be able to afford those changes to adopt something like an air source heat pump to heat their homes? So we're going to be looking at how we can support with that. And in a financial sense, it's critical for us that we are financially sustainable into the future. Okay, so that brings my 10 minutes to a close. Thank you for listening, and if you've got any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Yes, Steve. Thank you, Jamie. I'd just like to say thank you very much. I mean, I think a valuable service to our residents. And I think when we look at the voluntary sector as a whole, I think your leadership is second to none. And I think fantastic presentation. Got a couple of questions. Yes. So the first one is in terms of demographics, because you mentioned about the younger end at the what sort of age group, and is there areas where people are coming from in particular, or is it a younger age group, older age group? Is there any, do you have demographic information on your?
Yeah, we have it. So we do ask all of our clients what their date of birth is. So yeah, we can pull off detailed stats. Traditionally, we've been an organisation that's really serviced 55 pluses. What we saw during lockdown, it was the working age group that were coming to us, so much more 35 to 55 than we'd ever seen before. That has died away again now. So it was that working population that suddenly went, crikey, I've never had to claim a benefit before. Where is my income coming from? How am I going to manage next month?
Right, yeah. Okay, thank you. The last point then, Councillor Birch, and then I'll let members have a go, is I absolutely would welcome the opportunity to work closely with you, particularly around housing. We're restructuring our team to put more effort and support on housing following the council declaring a housing emergency. Yeah. So absolutely on that. Energy is another key area as well. Yeah. And then I think that whole benefits and stuff like that are areas where we would welcome working closely with you. So I'd be happy to take that challenge on board. And the only other thing, I'm assuming you'll let us have a copy of this presentation to circulate to all members.
Yeah.
Right, thank you. Right.
Councillor Callahan, you had a question, you submitted a question. Do you want to? Yeah, can you remember?
Yes, I sort of. Yeah, it was, you mentioned universal credit, obviously, has been one of the issues people contact you about. Because most people are on universal credit, although I think a lot of people are still on tax credits here in this area. So I don't know how widespread universal credit is, because you sort of change over, don't you, if you've got particular circumstances.
Yes, it's widespread now.
But it's kind of a general, but I know a few years ago, the CAB received, nationally this is, received £40 million or whatever from DWP in order to help payments of universal credit, which was kind of criticised at the time because it was obviously an independent organisation able to criticise and not, worry about fear or favour anywhere. I just wondered, A, whether the partnership deal is ongoing, and also whether you feel it compromises your work in any way, your ability to speak out against anything that you may not like about universal credit, or indeed anything else that the DWP may or may not be doing.
Interesting, isn't it? It's an interesting relationship. Thank you for that question. So in terms of ongoing work, which is what you started with, our current arrangements with them run to the end of March. And nationally, Citizens Advice is looking to recommission or to be recommissioned for the next piece of work. So we're actually hoping to continue doing what we're doing, which is providing a helpline for people who are claiming universal credit. And they are the people who go to the online system, look at it and go, I can't do that, I don't have this information, I don't understand the process, and or their complexity of their case means that the system doesn't work for them. So those are the people who ring in the helpline, and they're the people that we're helping. In terms of does that funding from DWP to national sort of impact our ability to challenge them? No. And I'm grateful you actually asked this question in advance because I've checked it with national. So what I've had back is nothing in the grant agreement compromises our core principles of independence, impartiality and confidentiality. And in fact, if we thought that was the case, we'd have never signed up for it. So we'll continue to speak out on problems with universal credit publicly and directly with the government. What that means is all the information that we collect is it is impartial information, if you like. So we collect a systematic, if we identify something that's systematically going wrong with the system, and then we share that back with the government and therefore with DWP, we are not making an unfair claim. So therefore we can actually continue to do what we are doing, which is presenting evidence that the system isn't working. Does that make sense?
Yes, you're happy.
I have a question on the matter of funding. So I wonder if you could just give some details of your funding, and in particular, could you perhaps remind members how much funding you obtain from this council,
Yeah.
and perhaps deal with any future funding issues you may have.
Yeah, great. Okay, so I think of our funding model as a Blue Peter totalizer. So I'd like to take you back to Valerie Singleton, back on the Blue Peter days when the totalizers were proper, sort of like an empty pot. And at the start of the year, we know basically what our costs are going to be. And we are very grateful because we start off with 2 big chunks of money towards that. So Devon County Council currently give us £35,000 a year, and this South Hams District Council give us 39 plus 10 plus 9 in various grant arrangements. So actually between Devon County and South Hams District Council, we cover around 65% of our fixed costs within any given year. When I joined Citizens Advice, I absolutely set about filling that remaining shortfall by fundraising. And we worked incredibly hard to do things like the Dragon Boat Race, and we did 80s fundraising nights, and we did cake bakes. And I tell you what, it's the hardest £10,000 I've ever made in my life. It's a brilliant experience, but I really learned that actually fundraising is not a successful mechanism for us. We're not a sexy charity. If you put us next to an organisation such as a hospice or somebody who's helping homeless people, then we're a bit dry. And so what we have to do to fill that funding gap is to secure those projects that I mentioned. So we have something like 15 different projects running at the moment, and each one of those allow us to provide specialist support to individuals. So like in the case of energy, it is the energy advisor, it's the trained specialist, but the project as a whole will make a contribution into our core service. And so that Blue Peter totalizer gets topped up each year by the different projects that we run. So my job is to make sure that we've got sufficient projects going on and we've got sufficient core funding that the two meet, and we make balance that out over a 12-month period.
What about the future?
I can't see the model changing significantly in the future. We work very closely with Devon County Council to assure them, and I'd like to assure you, that we are an organisation that needs continued support and that we represent good value for money. We are hugely grateful for the funds that we get from South Hams District Council, and if that were to reduce, we would have to consider the impact that would have on our ability to train and recruit new volunteers.
Thank you. Members, any questions?
Chair, I was interested in your community videos. Obviously, it's how the world has been operating so far. How wide in the community would you like to see those, and what sort of venues, and how would you like to see them operating?
Well, I had this great idea that they were going to pop up all over the South Hams, and it would be the panacea, because somebody from Salcombe might really struggle to get to a face-to-face service in Kingsbridge, or certainly here. What we're finding is the uptake really isn't as high as what we'd anticipated. And so our next steps are actually to go out to the community, to our clients, and also to our non-client base and say, is a video booth going to work for you? And we actually need to get a bit of customer feedback in terms of whether it's the right way forward or not. So before I do that, before we do that bit of research, we can't really say how they're going to.
Is it the actual venues that you're missing, or the sort of super, sort of looking across where you'd like to have the site?
Well, at the moment, the video booths are available on your mobile phone. So if you decided you wanted to speak to Citizens Advice, you can literally get on our website and press a couple of buttons, and then when an advisor appears, they will, or is free, they will pop up on your phone and go hi. The take-up is just so low. We've done as much. I mean, we thought we had done sufficient communication to get the message out there. Maybe it's about comms, and so it's a model that we're testing, but it just hasn't lit the touch paper in a way that we were expecting.
I was just wondering whether it is the ability people to have the communications and they prefer to sort of go to somewhere that have the sort of the mobile booth, somewhere in an organisation where they can sit down securely, safely, and go online.
Yeah. That was the original model, which is so we started it in Dartmouth, and we ended up with South Brent. The Bridgetown one never really took off, and there was another location. So we've only ever had 3 or 4, but consistently Dartmouth is the one where it works, and I think it's the human contact that helps. And then this idea of having it on your phone and people just sitting at home and getting in touch again, it just hasn't. So I don't know is the short answer. We're still testing it, and I think potentially it's something that we could look to rebrand or get that message out there, because it does, on the face of it feels right, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Good, thanks. Any other members? Councillor Abbott.
Yes. Hi. You mentioned communications with the MP, Mr. Magnum. Can you remind me what that was about?
Well, we had a general talk. We wanted to speak to him specifically ahead of the debate on universal credit around the £20 a week uplift.
Good. So, in the CAB that's here, then, do you cover all the South Hams District Council area, or just the eastern part?
No. So we also wrote to Gary Streeter. He doesn't engage with us on quite such a proactive basis. He acknowledges our letters, whereas Anthony Wagner was able to come into the office and have a chat.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? No. Oh, sorry, Councillor Smith.
If I might. One of the things which has happened after the pandemic was the pause on evictions, etc. Was lifted, wasn't it? And it was probably, was that a couple of months ago?
I think it was just this one.
This one, sorry. Okay. So have you noticed that more people need help with regard to that?
Yeah. That's I printed it off. It's too small, but I can send some details around. Around the eviction rate, or not the eviction rate, but the number of inquiries that we're seeing, people that are contacting us, that kind of thing. And when I spoke to some advisors, they just said that is the leading housing question. So when you saw in the very first graph, the fact that housing inquiries come up is people facing eviction. They're the biggest area of concern.
Right, good. And I was interested that you actually said that some people were looking at 30 or 40% uplift in their energy bill. It's getting to the point where 30 or 40% is actually quite a good deal, because I've been looking at some today and it's effectively it's 100%. So that is, I would imagine that you'll be quite busy with that.
I think everything's going to come together. People, and Christmas is coming as well. Also, we know what happens around Christmas time is that people actually prioritise Christmas over their debts. And so there's quite often a sort of head in the sand approach, and then come sort of January, February, that's when it'll actually look the gates, if you like.
Okay, and then just with your, because obviously you're based here, etc. now. So are you back, to whatever normal is, or?
No, not normal. No, so we just had a client drop into the office just as I was coming out, she was escorted into one of our meeting rooms and the advisor went to another meeting room, and so they're actually doing a video chat even though they're in the same building. We're just putting that precaution in place as a way of helping prevent the spread of coronavirus. At some point we're going to have to embrace what you have, that it's possibly time to move on. But we've had some internal challenges we have to face around that. So.
Thank you. Right. Do we have any quotes? Sorry, Councillor McLaren.
A quick question, but you made reference in the case study that you gave there, there was a huge reduction in their costs of energy, but obviously what goes hand in hand with that is a huge reduction in emissions, and there's a whole carbon aspect to this.
Yeah.
And you might be aware that this committee has also got a task and finish group at the moment looking at this whole issue and how to work with partners on reducing CO2 emissions across the district. It seems to me there's huge potential to work with citizen advice here, because your tentacles reach everywhere basically, and those people who are in fuel poverty are actually contributing greatly to the problem. So your help is necessary in both regards, both in getting rid of fuel poverty, but also reducing emissions across the district. So
Yeah.
I think there's potential to work with citizen advice more closely than we are at the moment in this regard. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't religiously measure our CO2 impact, but it is actually something that we can start to do. It would be quite an interesting way of measuring our impact. Okay, yeah, that's a good idea.
If there are no more questions, and I've been told there aren't any questions coming from those members or on Teams. So I'd like to conclude by putting forward a recommendation from the chair, read as far as that the committee thanks the Citizens Advice Bureau for providing an effective and valued service or valued services to those requiring help in the community, and then followed by the committee welcomes the CAB's proposal to work closely with the council on addressing the local housing crisis. I'd like to propose that from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Long. All agree? Yes? All those in favour? Right. Thank you very much indeed.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, thanks
Really
very much.
appreciate that.
Thanks. Right. I think we need Mr. Davis.
Sure, through that door now. It's my magic.
Magic. Well done. On time, well done. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the Ombudsman's annual review letter 2021. There is a report with the papers. Councillor Holt, would you like to introduce the report? No?
Yes, I did introduce the report, thank you, Chairman. The number of complaints passed to the Ombudsman and the number of upheld are within the normal range over the past 5 years. Most of the complaints upheld were reported in the previous reporting year. Only 2 complaints are yet to be investigated from this year's report. There were 2 upheld complaints with learning points. We have adopted and changed our procedures to prevent them happening again. And I think that's a key thing is as an organisation, if someone does make a mistake in how they deal with something, as long as they learn from that mistake, it's a valuable lesson. And I think I'm a great believer, if you make a mistake once and learn from it, that's fine. If you make that same mistake twice, that's not fine. You should have learned the first time. And excluding domestic waste complaints, the numbers have been static all year, but faster responsible customer contact has resulted in better customer service. Thank you, Chairman. It's a pretty standard report.
Mr. Davis, do you want to speak for the report?
Only really to say, the number of complaints that get past the Ombudsman every year has been in that range for a long period of time, and the 5 that were upheld this year, one was upheld without being investigated, which confused me, but wasn't quite sure how the Ombudsman can uphold a complaint without even looking into it. But so most of them were from previous years, and we've got a lot less hangover this year going forward. We did have also 3 months of the year where the Ombudsman wasn't receiving complaints during the initial part of COVID. So that may have delayed some complaints, but unlikely. Most of them probably would have come in after that period of time. And then from a complaints point of view, we've been updating our system. It went live around this time last year, and our stats are improving. We're getting much faster response from members of staff and ELT. So fast response back to the customer, and our focus now is on trying to get more customer contact, encouraging our staff to bring the customer, talk to them, understand the problem, so that small problems don't develop into large problems. You understand their issues, and then they don't go forward and ultimately be reported to the Ombudsman.
Will you answer that, Chair? That's okay. So the process that we've instigated now is myself and Mr. Davis and either Mrs. Moody or Mrs. Bowen review every Friday the outstanding complaints. We then look at that, and if needed, we invite members of ELT who own their complaints to a call on a Tuesday to explain what they're doing about stuff that we think is outstanding and shouldn't be. So there's a real focus within the organisation in terms of making sure that we are responding in a timely way to a complaint and that the complaint is being dealt with correctly. So we should see better results overall. And as Mr. Davies said, the next bit of focus is actually a lot of complaints come in via email, and of course email is very impersonal, and actually you sometimes don't necessarily understand what the complainant is complaining about, because it can either be a rant or it can be a lot of detail and you're not quite sure. So what we're trying to encourage is actually a telephone call with the complainant, because so many times, and certainly from my experience and other officers' experience, so many times you can diffuse a complaint and resolve the issue just by talking to the customer or the individual. So that is the next stage of focusing on complaints and reducing complaints and improving customer satisfaction.
With this substantial increase in complaints concerning domestic waste, how are they being handled?
There's a specific team within domestic waste that are picking them up, and they're picking them up quickly as well now. So there's I know we had initial issues over March to June period, but there's a specific team that are focusing on it.
So how are they being dealt with?
Contact the customer and trying to resolve the issues. The majority of the waste complaints is service issues, so it's something's gone wrong, you missed my bin, and I'm angry about it, as opposed to it being a specific or a structural problem.
Ultimately, Chair, we are reliant on the contractor, FCC, then doing the action that's required. So we are still a bit pest at the minute to the contractor on all of those. And certainly, as Mr. Davis said, in that early period, we were absolutely overwhelmed and swamped with complaints. And actually, we were then getting complaints about you've not responded to my complaint. So not only have you missed my bin and you've not collected it, but then you're not even telling me what you're going to do. You're not contacting me. Now we've kept sufficient resources on and got over that peak, and we're now managing those complaints within the timescales we've managed any other complaint.
The figures here until March 21, and do you have the figures from April to, say, October on the matter of domestic waste?
Just domestic waste? Yeah, I can give you them. These are the dashboards that hopefully we're going to roll out to you eventually. So you can look at this data as well. Updates. So we had from May we had a 77 sorry, both councils and choose it down a little bit.
Whilst Mr. Davis is doing that, one of the other things that we're instigating is a process that brings MP queries and MP complaints into the same collection method. So at the minute, an MP complaint tends to come to myself or Mr. Davis as the Chief Executive with, I've had this query about a benefit claimant or whatever. And they sort of bypass almost the complaint system. And what we're doing is we're going to be giving access to the MP's offices so that they can submit those directly, and they will then be included as part of our complaints process. Right, was it called then?
Yeah, so May, just for domestic waste for Southamptons, we had 104 complaints in May, 67 in June, 65 in July, then an uptick in August of 109, 71 September, and then 17 so far this month. We're looking significantly better this month. So we're halfway through.
Can you just remind us how many households that is, please?
Well, we offer, well, we do a waste service for 4,000 to 6,000 households.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions from members? Yes, Councillor Spencer.
I've got three. I don't know if you want them all together or one at a time.
All together, shall we?
All together, right. Section 3.9, which is actually the bit on page 10. It says training to ensure knowledge and consistency also forms part of the planning improvement plan to reduce the likelihood of errors in the first place. Can I ask when that plan was last reviewed? Because circumstances generally have changed quite dramatically following COVID, and what training has actually taken place, not specific individuals, but what training on what subjects has been necessary. That's the first one. The second one is on 3.14, which is on page 10. On paragraph A, it says, since March 21, improved performance with almost 50% of complaints now being dealt with within 2 weeks. I'd be unhappy if my complaint wasn't dealt with within 2 weeks. So can I ask what steps are being taken to improve that to perhaps what I maybe would accept it, which is same day, next day, within a couple of days or something like that, or something a little more realistic. And the third one is on 3.15, and it says there are a number of planned steps for further improvement. Nowhere in those planned steps can I see anything that talks about communication with members, because a lot of the complaints that come up to you as council or to us as a council come from members, and hence may go on to become complaints in the context of this report. And in 2.5 years, I've experienced very little member involvement. I send in my complaints, particularly about waste, and I rarely get any response. I rarely get asked for input. And if the complaint comes to me, then presumably the resident is thinking maybe I could do something that's a bit different. Probably not, but I'll have a go, certainly. So before these actually get to formal complaints to the Ombudsman, there may be a little more member involvement. Are there any plans for that?
So can I start in reverse order then? So in terms of your last question, Councillor Spencer, I think it's a really valid point, and I think I accept that, and I think we need to do more. I'm sure you agree, Councillor Hotwood, in terms of member engagement and involvement in dealing with complaints and understanding the response of the organisation and how we do that. So I think we will take that on board. Thank you for that. So, in terms of,
can I add to that? So eventually, you want to go live with an account for customers and also an account for members as well, and that will hopefully enable members to initiate processes on behalf of customers. And in doing so, you can either do it completely on their behalf. So say you've got a constituent who doesn't have any access to the internet, you could do that on their behalf, but you could also push forward a process and be linked to the complaint. And by doing so, you can see where it's at. So if you wanted to be involved, you could be involved in that way. So on the part of your dashboard, you can see you can make any process really that you want to be involved. So if they get updates and they're okay with sharing them, then you get updates as well.
Michael did talk about that in the IT working group. We haven't had a meeting for ages, if indeed we need one. And certainly I felt that was an exceptionally helpful part of the package. But it wasn't a priority. And it was very clear at the time that it was drifting to the back of the priority queue, and it hasn't happened yet. So do we have data for that?
So with accounts, we've run accounts before, and they get poor customer uptake. So what we want to do with accounts is go live with it fully functioning, so it works for customers and for councillors, and also with a suite of other information that's useful for them. So bringing in some of our mapping data, information about the local area, so that when we go live with it, there's a reason to get an account with us rather than just sign up for an account and then next time you want to do something, you just don't have to enter your address again. So we want to go live with bringing a lot of stuff together. So with obviously always got other things to do, it's going to be quite coordinated to get that all working together. We hope to start looking at it towards the end of this year. It's likely to be closer to the end of the financial year rather than the calendar year.
So you're going to look at it?
Yeah.
And roll it out?
As long as we can get all the ducks in the line and get the information, and hopefully only a few months afterwards. The concept is in the system already. It's us working out how we want it to work in specific cases, and also it's bringing everything else along. We don't want to go live with a system that only a few people will find useful, and then we just add complications for everybody else. We want it to be a useful account for everybody from the word go.
Sorry, those are all your questions.
No,
So that was only the last one. The second one was around the 2 weeks, responding to a complaint in 2 weeks. So at the minute, the timescale we give members of the public is 4 weeks, basically, it's 28 days. So in actual fact, what we're trying to do is improve that as a part of the corporate strategy, improving customer service. So the fact that we're now getting 50% done in 2 weeks means we can start to reduce that target, and that's part of this process. So hopefully we will continue to improve, and we can then say to the public, we will be dealing with your complaint. I mean, ideally, what we should be avoiding is complaints altogether. And that's what we should be working to, and that's about improving the wider organisation. But obviously, there will always be service failures with the services that we deliver. And people will always complain, justifiably sometimes unjustifiably.
Well, I am a resident in Southampton. If I got a response to a complaint and was told that it wasn't going to be dealt with for 4 weeks, I'd be pretty upset because it's something that's motivated me to make the complaint in the first place. So I'd be pretty unhappy with 4 weeks in the first place, and a much more realistic customer-focused response time would be pretty quickly, 48 hours.
In actual fact, that's what we're going to say. So we've got an acknowledgement bit in the process, and when we talked about the telephone calls, the idea was you would acknowledge that in how many days? We said 3 days? Yeah. 3 days, that if you did submit a complaint, somebody, where we want to get to is within 3 days, somebody rings you up and says, oh, hello, Mr. Spencer, you've complained about this, let me just understand what it is. This is what we will need to do. This is the time frame we will have. What you should have, what we're working to, is some contact where someone rings you, discusses your complaint with you, and then tells you what our course of action is going to be. And I think if we get to that, that will be a real step forward for us.
And also, when I wrote the report, it was for the previous ONS. So our figures have improved with me and Molly's regular meetings. Our figures have improved a reasonable amount. So from July, we were down to an average of 10, so just over 10 days, 11 days. And now we're around 6-7 days on average. And obviously, that's for simple complaints. You don't need to acknowledge the customer. You can look at it, answer it there and then. So those they get done quickly. For things like planning complaints, quite often they take quite a lot of investigation, so they're never going to be done in 2 to 3 days. But at the moment, say we're looking at under a week on average, but that does still, we do still have some complaints which
much longer because they're more complicated. And sorry, Councillor Spencer, what was the first question again?
The first one was relating to 3.9 on page 10, which talks about training, talks of training, and that being done, following the identification of problems and so on. So I was asking about the performance improvement plan, and when was that last reviewed in the light of the unique scenario that exists post-COVID or midway through COVID, or however you define our current position, and what areas of training have you actually done in practice have been necessary?
Right. I don't know the answer to some of that, and I'm looking at the exec members in the room, and am I right in saying that there is a update on the planning improvement plan coming to executive tomorrow? So there is an update in terms of coming forward. In terms of the wider training, we're also in the process of linking back to the IT point, a new IT system for planning. So we've been doing a lot of training with the team on the new system as well. So that's been the main focus of training at the moment. But now the head of the planning team, Pat Weimer, has a weekly call with all his team where they look at decisions, they look at complaints that they get and make sure that any cascade goes out to the rest of the organisation or to the planning team. But there's a wider, as you said, planning improvement plan, and that is coming to the executive tomorrow.
Right, okay, so I haven't read that. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Just one.
That's a lot.
I think reading through this, it does come back to, when you talk about training to ensure knowledge and consistency. Looking at this, looking at the complaints, it is that where people aren't receiving the correct, in other words, people dealing with problems don't have the knowledge or it's not consistent. The training is going to sort of hopefully knock that out, but that seems to be the sort of theme that comes through a lot of the complaints, that there hasn't been a level of consistency, whether it's in waste, planning or any of it. And how is that going to be dealt with across the organisation? Knowledge of people within the organisation to be able to deal with the initial inquiries correctly.
Thank you for that, Councillor Long. So for newer members, I'm not sure how familiar you will be, but as an organisation a few years ago, we started in effect customer service away days, where we took big sections of the organisation, we filmed customers who'd articulated their experiences with the council, some good, some really bad. The one that strikes me is the guy who was homicidal over, I think it was a bin issue. And it was not the bin issue, it was the way we'd not responded, not dealt with him. So we started that process. Now, I have to say, COVID-19 I think, as an organisation, has made us much more insular. So as we have all been working from home, we've all been on Teams and video calls, then I think the organisation has lost a degree of customer focus. And we're looking as a senior leadership team as to how we can reinstate that, because we think it's absolutely key to improving customer service in a time when the organisation is mainly remote. So I think we need to reconnect with the customers, and that's what we're looking to do. So we're starting to look at plans how we will do that. And we've talked about having small groups with myself and the chief exec, just talking about customer experience and the importance of customer experience. We're using the customer strategy as a refocus on customer experience, and we've instigated a number of reviews. So the planning review, we're looking at the Revs and Bends service, and they are not about cutting staff, they are reviews to improve service and improve the customer experience, and that's the focus that we will have over the next 12, 18 months. That should be constant.
I think it's having the staff there who have the knowledge and the ability to respond correctly.
Yes.
The first call. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Are there any questions from members on Teams?
Chairman, I'd just like to say that I think our absolute focus is not to get the complaints in the beginning, and that will always be the focus.
No questions so far, Chair.
Okay, so there's no more questions. What I would like to propose from the chair is the looked at paragraph of section 4 of the report. I propose that this committee, about 4.2, notes the content of the local government ombudsman's annual review letter, and followed by welcomes the high-level actions to improve the customer experience as set out at 3.14, and then welcomes the proposed future actions as set out at 3.15, followed by, picking up a point made by Councillor Spencer, is that requests an increase in members' involvement in the complaint process, and then that followed by that there is a report back to this committee in 6 months' time on the implementation of the future actions. There is talk within the report of future actions, and I think it would be helpful for the report in 6 months' time to see how that's going. So I'd like to propose that from the chair. Do I have a seconder?
Second.
Second. You like to say anything? No? Do we all agree? Hands up then, please. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Next item is the overview and scrutiny annual report. That's a document that has been distributed. I'll just ask if there's any questions. We're asked to approve. This is a draft report, and we're requested to approve it. Are there any questions? Councillor Spencer.
There will be a pain again.
It's okay.
When you look at the report itself, and it's an observation which is a little bit petty maybe, but we talk about submission of documents to this committee 7 days ahead of the meeting itself in the report, and yet the draft report that says that didn't arrive until Friday. So can we actually take some lessons and abide by our own rules?
And do better.
And do better.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure who's responsible, but I won't seek to blame him or her.
Okay. Right. Noted. So can that take it? Sorry, Councillor, did you want to say?
Well, yes, Chairman. We received this report. I saw it this morning. I don't know how long it had been sitting there, but I read my way through it, and I thought it was a very good report. It gives us an insight into most of what the council does throughout the year, which I thought for members to read it, and you can gain a lot of information from it. So I welcome the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Abbott.
I've just got a few questions about timings that are in it, and it's either page, I don't know how you want to do it, maybe page 6 of the internal page numbering, or that would be 13 if it's down on the bottom bar. Housing strategy progress update, number 3 says, the results of the consultation exercise being reported back to a future panel meeting. And that and 2 others, one on page 8, at its first formal meeting 2021, report back to the panel in 6 months there. And as an outsider, I just sort of don't know where I am with those dates. I don't know when that 6 months is going to occur, and I don't know whether
the way it works is that if there is a future action arising out of a meeting, such as the item that we have just discussed, where we say 6 months, that will actually be fed into the work programme. If you notice the item 12 on the agenda, there is a panel work programme. So if there is an action that is to be taken at a later date, it is then fed into the work programme. So the way that acts as an aid memoir to make certain that if this committee asks for a report, say in 6 months' time, it is then fed into the work programme, and so it doesn't escape scrutiny, as they say.
Yeah. And so you're comfortable with all those three examples, that they will all be, one of the three is about something that happened in the past anyway, but as I suppose I'm being numbers focused, but the system is working, you're comfortable with those phrases in your report?
Well, the phrase that to be looked at a later date or whatever.
Yes, so the third one, that yes, I'm happy, the report back to the panel in 6 months that's just going to be built in then, so that will come up. And I suppose that's why the results of the consultation exercise will be reported back to a future panel meeting. And that will always be caught.
So which page is this on?
If you're on the slider bar at the bottom, that's page 13. Housing Strategy Progress Update. It's the third of 4 points in the middle of that page.
Is this to do with, I'm looking at page 13, yes.
Well, it's 13 on the bottom slider bar. Or it's page 6 of the formal report. Or it might be page 11 if it's on there. It's on which one you're referring to. There are 3 ways of reference there.
Sure, could I make a suggestion? So this was to approve the draft report if we approve it with the amendments suggested by.
Well, they might be superfluous.
Oh, yeah. Well, we can look at that and see that. I mean, because I think we did review the consultation of the housing thing, so we've already done that. Yeah. So I think we should probably change the hence to say that it was reviewed, and like say, put a date when it was reviewed, and when it will be reviewed again. So I think, taking on board your comments, Councillor, I think we can.
Yeah, well, I think, yeah, but what we need to bear in mind that this is a report that takes us up to the end of March of this year. So there are things that have happened since March.
Yes.
So what I think it'd be an awful waste of time us ploughing through to see. I mean, things that are mentioned in there have been done between April and now, and there are some things still outstanding. But as I mentioned, they are in the work programme. Yeah, nothing. I'd like to think that nothing slips below the radar. Okay. So can we approve the? I think there's what is on the report. Yes, I think there's a recommendation. Is there on the report? Yeah, recommend that be approved. Yes. All those in favour? Any against? Thank you. Right, task and finish group update. Councillor Thomas is unable to be here, so he's asked Councillor Mackay to give the reports. Councillor Mackay, could you like to give the reports?
Yes.
On an update on the task and finish group.
Yes. Councillor Thomas has sent me some text that he's asked me to read out, so I shall just read that. The first meeting on August the 19th set the group's terms of reference. Guided by officers, the group agreed that it would examine the existing action plan, hear from invited external representatives, and hold a final meeting to consider recommendations, come back to ONS. The second meeting on September 23rd involved a 90-minute discussion around the action plan and how the group might introduce manageable targets and/or measuring capabilities. Mr. Williams presented an updated action plan, colour-coded to look at potential impact levels, low, medium, high. The group discussed the difference between those areas that council could directly control as opposed to areas where it might influence or lobby. Councillors also discussed where specific manageable, accessible targets might be included within what was acknowledged by all concerned to be an organic document. Most recently, the group met on October 7th to hear presentations by representatives from the following organisations: Bioregional Learning Centre, Sustainable South Hams, South Dartmoor Community Energy, EL21, FESOC, and Mulberry Planning Team. each organisation presented 10 minutes on how they could assist the district council and vice versa. From the comments made by members and invitees at the end, it's clear that this was got to be an extremely valuable session. The final meeting of the group will take place on October 21st, when it will review its findings to date and make recommendations based on the terms of reference described. The work already undertaken and the timescales involved, I hope that you as a committee can see that the TNF have every intention not only to perform the task set, but also to finish it in good time. I thank Mr. Powell and Mr. Williams for their support and members for their willingness to participate in an honest, open and respectful manner. Signed, Councillor Dan Thomas, Chair of the TNF.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thanks for that. Any questions on that? Can I just thank the group for undertaking the task in the time that was set by the Task and Finish group, as mentioned in the last paragraph, that at our next meeting that will receive the report and recommendations from the Task and Finish group. So thank you for the group for achieving the target set by the committee. Are there any questions on the report? Can we accept the report? Thank the Task and Finish group for proceeding with haste. Yes? All agree? Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much indeed. So that now brings us to the waste service update. Oh, sorry. I do apologise. Yeah, sorry. The work programme that's set out, that sets out the future work programme for ONS. You see we have a pretty full agenda for the next meeting. Any questions? We accept that? Yes, all agree? Yeah. Okay, thank you. So that brings us to the item waste service update. Members want a short break before we start on this?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so what time is it now? It is, can we be back at 3:20? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Everybody agree? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Well, I don't know.
Well, it's a challenge. Come on, Rick, let's start. Okay, so start, please. Well, the item on the agenda is the waste service update. I'll ask Councillor Baldry to stop this item and do the introductions, please.
Thank you, Chairman. As I understand this item, it is mainly questions from members through you, of course, to FCC. I am here to answer any questions you think, or members think they would like me to answer. From Italy and in support is Sarah Moody, who is isolated down the Centre Isle. Steve Montague and I have both become experts on waste, which we weren't perhaps 2 years ago. Sarah is a real expert. So she will answer some of the technical questions. And from FCC, we have Steve Longdon. Get your title, Steve, when you start, perhaps you'll introduce yourself. But he is head of the FCC operation for Britain. And within this Brian Ashby, who is in charge of local operational matters across this part of England. With you, Chairman.
Would you like to start?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. And Councillor Baldry, thank you for promoting me. Very kind of you. I'm actually the Operations Director for FCC UK recycling activities. So that's everything excluding landfill and energy from waste. So the South Hants and West Devon contracts are my portfolio. Brian here is the head of municipal collections and street scenes, so he looks after that half of my business, of course. We have been requested this afternoon to attend and to provide you with an update on two specific areas prior to taking questions. And those areas are the measures that we're implementing to respond to the current HGV or LGV, we'll interchange those terms, but they're the same thing, shortage, and what our proposed plan is to migrate everybody in South Amazon to the full Devon Line service. I've been asked to present a short presentation, which it will be relatively short, high level, because I'm sure there are plenty of questions that will follow. So I just wanted to give a bit of context to the driver shortage. I suspect will have seen lots of coverage in the national press and media. And so the first point I want to make is this is not a situation that is in any way unique to South Hants or indeed FCC environment. It's affecting multiple organisations and councils across the UK and across multiple sectors, from healthcare through to retail, through to leisure. And indeed, it's a problem that exists outside of the UK as well. And the other important point is to make right at the outset is there is no simple solution here. It's a complex problem that's going to require a multitude of actions to resolve. The Road Haulage Association and the Logistics UK estimate that there's about 100,000 short for qualified drivers in the UK at the moment. So that's people qualified to drive trucks, anything over 7.5 tonnes. Government estimates are slightly different to that, but still of that sort of magnitude. And as I've said, the resulting impact of that you see covered in the national media on an almost daily basis at the moment. Many other councils in the country are in similar positions, facing challenges, including many of your neighbouring councils. You only have to go onto their websites to look at their updates. You can see that they are struggling in some of the same areas as we are at the moment. So it's, it's a direct impact of COVID and Brexit and some other factors in there as well. There is a structural problem in the UK at the moment. When you look at the ONS data that was released yesterday with 1.1 million vacancies, record high in 20 years of recording it. You've got the furlough scheme impacting, and that's ended in the end of September, obviously, in the uplift in universal credit. Vacancies in our sector, which is covered under the water supply, waste, remediation and sewage sector, are up 30% in this quarter, and up 147% to this time last year. So this is I throw these figures out there just to give you a scale of the problem. The issues in the pipeline are that the LGV testing that is undertaken, there was about 30,000 tests less undertaken in 2020 than previously, and that shortfall has continued into 2021 as well. There are delays currently in getting provisional licenses processed at the DVLA, delays in securing test dates. Even when you go through getting provisional license, your medical, and then you go on your training, and then you do your test, the pass rate on the test is just north of 50%. So effectively, for every 2 that we put through, you get 1 driver out of the system. And there is an appeal question around what is the appeal of being an HGV driver in today. It's important to understand that an HGV driver driving an articulated truck up and down the motorway network between distribution centre and customer is very different driving operation than driving a refuse truck around tight streets, reversing in and out of cars and collecting waste. But there is definitely an appeal about non-driving roles that are perceived to be better work-life balance, better pay, better terms and conditions, particularly when you look at some of the truck stops that are up and down the country with inadequate facilities. So, faced with all those, and this has really come about quite quickly. So, what have we done? And the question is, what's our response been? And the reality is that we've introduced quite a broad range of initiatives and reinforced those that already existed within our business. We have done the obvious thing, I guess, which is increased the basic rate of pay quite substantially. I think we've decreased the rate of pay 3 times since the contract started now. The last increase was, as I say, for drivers was substantial. From our market testing that we've done, those rates of pay now in South Downs are comparable to or ahead of neighbouring authorities. And all the evidence is that we are not losing drivers to other councils. We lose drivers to other driving roles or to non-driving roles. We fully fund driving tests, so if anybody wants to take an LGV test, we will fully fund that training and that test. We have people in the business at the moment who are about to commence that and others to follow. We will provide fully funded apprenticeships. That's a year and a day's duration. We have a recommend a friend reward scheme where existing employees can benefit from introducing somebody else. We have traditionally recruited through agencies, so we've extended the number of agencies with whom we work and engage with, including specialist driver agencies, which you'd expect, but also general labour agencies. We're actively recruiting those agency staff to become permanent staff, because we know that the equity they have with us in the contract increases with their permanent members of staff. We're providing part-time working to fit around family life. I'm not going to be gender specific, but we appeal to everybody. We'll fit shifts around family life and flexible hours to assist in the work-life balance. And traditionally, we, as a sector, the waste industry has been not particularly great at that. We have overtime opportunities at the weekend. They're not compulsory, so they're optional. So those who want to take it, it's there. Those who don't want it, don't have to do it. As a business, we wrote to the Home Secretary back in July as an individual business, and we're also a co-signatory to the Environmental Services Association, which is the sector representative body, who also wrote to the government, urging them to do more to protect the vital waste and recycling services, which are so critical to public health. We called for the introduction of temporary worker visa for the LGV drivers and for the occupation to be included on the SOL, the official shortage occupation list. The government has responded on that in a small way, and obviously everything is helpful, but in the context of 100,000 vacancies, 5,000 visas, it's clearly not going to solve the problem. In addition to that, what we've done, some of you may have seen this, we've launched a driver recruitment campaign in which we seek to expand upon the benefits available of a driving career in FCC in the waste and recycling sector. And some of the benefits that attach to working for us include cycle to work scheme, a best doctor scheme, which gives employees access to medical advice free of charge, employee assistance program, eye care vouchers, occupational health support, pension schemes, life insurance, death and service benefits, and 28 days annual holiday. Now, I say all that because everybody might think, well, that's fairly standard, but in the driving industry, that doesn't always come with all jobs. So the package is quite appealing, but the headline pay rates, as an agent for the authority, we know that they can't compete with business-to-business pay rates. Because you're a business and your cost base goes up, you put your price up to a consumer, and ultimately we, all as consumers, pay. We're in a very, very different and difficult place as a local authority and a local authority's partner. We're also refurbishing the crew rooms and changing rooms at the depots with a view to making them more appealing, more attractive. We've put in free coffee vending machines. Certainly down at Ivory Bridge, and that we're pending those going in at Tor Quarry and the 2 depots in West Devon. So there's quite a lot that we're doing. We do have a few things left that we can influence. They're not really for discussion today because they are going to be dependent upon how things play out. But the reality is, at the moment, those changes that we've made have stopped the exodus of drivers that we were having. We are still challenged when it comes to recruiting new drivers. That's the current status on that. And the other question I was asked to give you an update on is where we were in terms of the plan to migrate to the Devon Line service. And it's just worthwhile going back. I know you had a presentation from my ex-colleague, Mr. Barnfield, a few months back, detailing where the challenges were for us, but it's just worth reminding ourselves that we're dealing with significantly increased levels of recycling, both volumes and weights. Anybody expected, I think that's fair to say, when we bid the contract, and that's in our view is down to COVID. As importantly, not only have we got total tonnage and volume increases, but we've got significant changes in the composition of that recycling. We've got large increases in pretty much all materials other than paper. So cardboard and cans and plastics are our particular problem. Cardboard creating issues on the volume capacity on the trucks, and paper, cans and plastics creating capacity issues in the depots. We understand that it's a very high volumes, low weight material. This recycling system is complex. If you look at the trucks, you've got 5 prime compartments: paper, glass, food, cans and plastics, and then you've got some small compartments for peripheral items. But once one of those compartments is full, that truck has to return to the depot and unload. You compare that with a standard refuse truck, as a single body, big compactor plate, and it doesn't really matter what it eats, it will eat it until it's full, and then only when it's completely full, it doesn't have to go back and unload. So understanding what materials are arising at the curbside from different households, because it's different demographics and different levels of affluence, provide and create different volumes of waste, is very complex. What we've been doing over the summer period is collecting the data, because there's no point collecting the data from, say, just a single week's collection. You've got to collect it over a period of time for it to be representative. And we've done that over about a 3-month period over the summer. And then we have to analyse that data, and that work is well advanced. It's not fully complete at the moment, but it's well advanced, because that determines the weights and the volumes that we've got to deal with. And from that, then that determines the resource levels, the numbers and types of vehicles and crews and supervision that we need, and also the infrastructure requirements. So that's the vehicle parking requirements, the depot storage volumes, by each individual material stream, and how many times the trucks come back to tip, how many times we have to load bulkers out to move the material onto the reprocessors. So as I say, that work is well advanced. There's a bit to complete on it before we present it to officers for review, which we expect to be in the near term. And once we've done that, then it will be up to officers and ourselves to review that and decide how we'll take that forward. That's the status as we are today.
Thank you. I could start by asking some questions from the chair, and then I'll open it to questions. How many drivers do you employ at the moment?
We have a need, including, so we were fully staffed, including a pool of reserves, for want of a better phrase. We would have 55 drivers and 98 loaders.
Is that just for specifics? Is that hybrid? Is that just hybrid?
That's the full service.
We talk about Southampton, not West Devon. Yes. So what you're saying, to operate your service, you say it's 55, 98, 55 drivers, 98. So what have you got at the moment?
We have, well, I've got you in a position that unfilled, we can do the maths, but we have 8 LGV driver positions unfilled.
Yes.
7.5 ton driver positions unfilled. And 18 loaders.
So, in summary then, you're 15 drivers down and 18 loaders down, yes. So you're saying that you're seeking to recruit, yet if you go onto your website, where you clearly state where the vacancies are, etc., you're recruiting for drivers in Bedford. Why is there no mention of Southampton?
If you go onto the website through FCC Environment, the landing page takes you to a link for driver recruitment that is non-contract specific. There is a glitch which we found out this afternoon, that if you go in through a different way, what you found happens, and I've only become aware of that this morning. So we'll get that maybe. So just Google FCC Environment and go onto FCC Environment, you will come up with a link into the applications for the drivers.
I've gone onto your website on several occasions to see if you are advertising for drivers, and I've not been able to find. It's clear that you're recruiting drivers in Bedford, but certainly not in Southampton. So, I mean, and the other thing, just following that through, is that there is a website that provides reviews on employers and drivers, etc. And I think it's fair to say you don't come out in any sort of just a shining example. I mean, are you having a difficulty recruiting as a result of what may appear to be reputational damage?
I'm not sure what website you're referring to, but recruiting into, there's always been a high churn rate within the waste sector. That's reality. And our traditional way of recruiting has been through agencies, and there's a high degree of churn rate that way as well.
So, so how are you going to reach 55, 98? What steps are you taking locally to ensure that you get up to 55 / 98? I mean, you've given us general activities you're doing, but what are you going to do specifically in Southampton to bring you up to 55, 98?
Well, we are moving to, as I say, take agency staff on board as full-time employees of FCC. That their reach as an employment agency is far greater than ours. Effectively, they're advertising as, they're acting as our recruitment agent, recruitment partner. And we have got people transitioning from the agency into the business. Brian's got the numbers.
34 moved over in 2 months, so 8 drivers and 26 loads. I would just, our agencies, our local agencies are advertising on our behalf. So you would, we tend to find staff through agencies more than we do from individual adverts. We have had adverts over the last 2 months on Indeed, Web Recruit, which are they are well-known recruitment sites, and we have had, they do actually come directly to me, and no LGV interest on that at all. One's 2 7.5 ton and 3.5 ton driver. So we are advertising through other means locally, and our agencies are advertising locally as well.
So do you anticipate reaching 55, 98 by the end of the year?
That's a really difficult question to answer. I understand why you ask it, but it's a really difficult question to answer. At the moment,
we want to see what impact the 960,000 people that were on furlough at the end of September has when they come back into the workforce, because there's no doubt that some of the drivers that we've employed have got, not necessarily in Southampton, but generally have gone off to do non-driving jobs in warehouses and stuff like that. So we hope that we don't expect 960,000 drivers to come back off furlough, but there will be a percentage that will come back into the workforce and will return drivers into driving roles.
Are you confident that you can get anywhere near 55.98 by the end of the year?
I'm confident we can get nearer to it than we are at the moment. Now, I know that's not a very straightforward, that's a politician's answer, excuse me, but it's very difficult because this is a moving target every day.
Okay, just going to the second part of your presentation, where you gave up the, you mentioned about increased level of recycling, increase, etc. These were your colleague, Mr. Barnfield, who presented to this committee in June, raised the same problems at that meeting. What you basically said was a repeat of what we were told in June to a certain extent. What he said to us in June is that was the effect that he would produce an implementation plan which would show that the full service would be achieved by the end of the year. And I've just checked the minutes of the meeting, and it said that there will be an implementation plan showing that there will be a full service. When I mean a full service, that's the full recycling service, grey bins, brown bin, etc., by the end of the year. So, are you going to achieve what we were told by Mr. Barnfield in June? In other words, we're going to have a full service by the end of the year.
I cannot commit to that, Councillor. This is a very, very complex problem. I appreciate the residents. It looks very easy to just come along and take the bin and boxes. Behind that is a very complex system. Some, as I say, some very unexpected horizons in terms of volumes and weights. You have to understand that. That has to be correct. It's critical, because otherwise, when we do introduce the service, it won't work. So I would rather take a bit more time, get that right, and understand what is needed. That will be additional resource compared to and specialist vehicles that aren't on the road at the moment. Understand that, and equally, I need to talk to the officers about that before I can give any real commitment.
But why haven't we had an implementation plan that was promised in June?
Because we needed to analyse the data, and that's taken longer than we anticipated.
But we weren't told about that in June. We weren't told that there would need to be, the data needed to be looked into, etc. We were told that there would be an implementation plan presented, and that implementation plan would show that we would be up and running full service by the end of December. So the problem is we've not even received an implementation plan. So why haven't we received an implementation plan?
I can't comment on the last meeting, but what I am saying to you is it's critical that we get the data collection, the data analysis right. I'm happy that we've done that, and we are virtually through that piece of work.
So you're not able to make a commitment to get to a full service by the end of December?
I can't make that commitment anyway, Councillor, because I have to discuss that with officers first.
Councillor Spencer.
Yeah. Just staying on that same point, I'm looking at your website that says you deal with 60 local authorities across the UK. You have the data from 60 local authorities already without doing your 3-month survey down here. Whilst I accept to some extent that each one of those 60 local authorities is different, they must be broadly the same. So I don't actually get the whole problem of your delay because of getting data, which arguably you've already got.
So I understand the question. 60 local authorities that we work for, we do not provide collection services for all 60 of those authorities. So a lot of those authorities we're providing household waste recycling services, transfer station services, and so on.
60 local authority clients from our cost-effective collection, recycling and treatment options for household waste.
Yes, so treatment is household waste recycling centres, transfer stations, composting, etc. We have 12
12 local authority clients where we deliver collection services for. All of those service configurations are different, so we're collecting different materials in different areas in different ways. So I understand the question, and it's not possible to translate those arisings out of an authority in the Midlands to an authority down here, because it's all very different.
Just continue. You're collecting your data over the summer period, where we have long holiday makers.
Yeah.
The collection data for the winter period may well be totally different.
Okay.
So are we going to wait for another 3 months for winter collection, winter data?
As I said, we are nearly through the analysis. We understand that the collection data in the summer is different to the winter. We need to work that through, and we have worked that through in the analysis.
Okay.
Councillor Snowden.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I've got 3 questions. First of all, with regard to recruiting drivers, etc. I mean, I like the chairman looked at your website, etc. and went through it all, and as he's re-emphasised what he said. There's jobs available in Bedford, Luton, Sutton, Courtney, Hall, but there's no mention of Ivy Bridge. So you've given us a part explanation of why that is, but the question that a lot of people are asking, and not just in this room, but a lot of people, our residents, they're hearing that you're short of drivers, etc. Yet they're saying we don't see any adverts in the local press, we don't see any adverts, in the local media generally, for the staff that you want, and surely you need to be recruiting on the ground around here. That's my first question. The second one is, and I've expressed this before, the view that when this contract was taken on, it was a joint contract. There's a lot of synergy between ourselves and West Devon. And I remain amazed that the West Devon contract, West Devon has sailed on, like a liner, virtually into the sunset, whereas we're effectively sinking. And I just cannot understand why there is no synergy, why there is no linkage. For example, has any thought been given to, you talk in your driver recruitment about overtime, and so offering drivers overtime and staff overtime, etc. Well, what about the staff at Oakhampton, etc.? Any thought giving them additional overtime, additional drivers' hours, anything like that in order to help out here? Then the third point relates to what you said with regard to analysing the data. I mean, listening to what you're saying, one would have thought, that this had been going on for a long time. But this system has only been in action, a few months. It appears that it was woefully under-designed in the first instance. I mean, the fact that you've got to go back now and you've got to reanalyze all these figures. We've got a new transfer depot, we've got new lorries and everything like that, but it just appears that it is woefully under-prepared. So those are my 3 questions. Local people, help from West Devon, and, well, the fact that it just seems so poorly designed.
So as far as the recruiting locally, as I said before, we are advertising locally in the areas where we do normally see a better return. I have no problem with putting adverts in local papers, but historically that whole medium has dropped away, and that is not where we tend to get them from. Quite happy, I will review that, and we can put some adverts in local papers, but genuinely, I don't think we will get that take up. We are advertising on the job sites, Indeed, etc., which is where we can pick up people from, and the agencies who have a pool of the type of staff that we're looking for. They are fully aware of our requirements, and they are looking for that. I will have a word locally and talk about it. As far as West Devon is concerned, I do like your analogy of sailing into the sunset. They have their own problems. The difference there is we haven't changed the service, and we have rounds which are not completed there. The guys there are doing overtime during the week. They're doing their own overtime during the weekend. So it is genuinely, if I could, I would. I don't want to not do it, but they have their own opportunities much more local. And yeah, Sarah's on a weekly call and a daily call where we talk about the resources in West Devon as well as South Ham. So there are issues there. They have the same driver shortages there we do. Obviously not as compounded.
Okay, but I think you were suggesting that we were woefully underprepared.
I was.
Yes.
I'm happy to do this.
Well, I will contest that. Right. Obviously. The reality is that the volumes and weights of tonnages that we're picking up is far in excess of what the system was designed for. In that respect, your comment is absolutely correct. We're trying to do far more work with the people and the vehicles that we've got. The reason for that, I'm of the view, and I'm convinced of this view, is because of COVID. So all the behaviours that's driven, and the working from home, and the change in societal behaviour, particularly when you look at the composition of the recycling stream, all confirms that view. I don't accept that we were underprepared. I think we tried to launch what is, I said this at the time, in fact I've said this to officers and councillors, both before the procurement began, during the procurement and after award, that what we're trying to do in whole system terms is take a former council employed workforce into the private sector. We're then going to do a full reroute. We're going to change from a single sack collection into a full source segregated collection. That in collection terms, in waste collection terms, that's the most difficult thing we will do. And that is before you layer on the complexities and additional challenges of COVID and Brexit. It was already a tough task, and those two events have made it very, very, very challenging.
Thank you. Councillor Brazil.
Thank you, John. Yeah, through you. I mean, first of all, just slightly about COVID. I mean, actually, COVID helped you out because people weren't allowed down here for all their homes during the COVID. So far from adding to it at the time, actually, COVID was your friend. But let's move on. So you've talked about 55 drivers and 98 handlers. What was the number that you originally thought you were going to need? And does that 55-98 include reinstating the brown bin collection? So that would be my first questions around that. My second question is about, I heard you say at one point that you're going to need additional resource. Does that mean that you're going to come back to us at council and say, in order to fulfil the contract, we're going to have to pay you more money?
Okay.
And my last point would be that I appreciate you talk about West Devon. I understand West Devon paid for their brown bin collection, and that may be a factor here. What is the future of the brown bin collection, and when can we expect that to be reinstated?
I don't have the numbers that we originally envisaged. Sorry, I just don't have those. I am happy to go away and confirm those, but I don't have those to hand. I'm not going to enter into a discussion around commercial terms. This isn't the forum for doing that. Any conversations we have around that will be through officers. Sorry if that doesn't satisfy you, but that's the way it is. And the brown bin collection, we are in discussions with the officers about options for that and trigger levels at which we could introduce various services, but we don't have a conclusion on that at the moment.
Just that point about officers and discussing. I mean, you can discuss as long as you like with officers. In the end, it's us who will be taking the decision, and members of the public will be impressing upon us whether we feel the decision should be taken. So I mean, you may think it's a nice little cosy club that you've got there discussing things with officers, but actually it's the members, the elected members, that will decide. So at some point you're going to have to start discussing it with us as well.
I have not suggested it's a cosy club, Councillor Brazil. But our relationship contractually is through the supervising officer, which is an officer of the council.
Thank you. I can confirm that we have a professional relationship, and it certainly isn't cosy these days, I would say. In terms of the garden waste collection, Councillor Brazil, there's a report coming to executive tomorrow, which is up to date. It's not even been finished yet. I'm still writing it. In terms of options available, been talking to FCC about those options. They will be coming to the executive tomorrow, the executive to consider what options are available. So that has been an ongoing and changing situation that is right to the wire. So that will be coming tomorrow. But we have been discussing that with FCC.
Councillor, yeah. Mr. Molyneux said more or less what I was going to say. The reason the report is going to be late is because we are still working right up to the last minute to try and find a means to get the brown bins emptied. And it is proving very difficult because everyone we speak to, including FCC, are short of drivers. And if they are going to do the work for us, then they would have to cease other services which they are presently operating. But we are working very hard, working with FCC and with others, to be fair, to get the brown bin sorted out. And Chairman, I've been remiss and it's been pointed out to me, I should have said to you, several members at the beginning, when I introduced Sarah Rudy, that she has, of course, taken over from James Savage in that role, and she's brought an enormous amount of expertise to the job, and she is leading the discussions in order to get somewhere with the brown bins. But I don't apologise to members for the fact that the report has not been published, because we want to work right up until this evening to try and get something done.
Thank you. Councillor Long. I was interested in some of the points that you raised. If we can go to the sort of the driver side. I'd like some more information because you talked about the turnover with drivers and operators and recruitment. How is that balanced out? Because obviously you've got a, I hate the word that you used, churn rate. Churn is quite, it's not a way to talk about people. It's a turnover in staffing there. What is that balance? Because obviously you were looking to recruit and you were looking to train drivers from existing staff. It'd be interesting to know sort of how many people you're losing, how many people you're recruiting in, how that turnover fits in, and have you managed to train any drivers? Because it all seems, I know it's fairly fluid because you're going to be losing people and you're bringing people in, but it'd be interesting to know whether you're levelling out or whether you've still got those peaks and troughs and, it is still as difficult as it was previously.
I'll take that in reverse, if I may. Is it as difficult as it was previously? Yes, in terms of getting the numbers up. I would describe it as stabilised. So the actions that we've done have meant that we are bringing people in small numbers. We are losing people in small numbers. We've had some drivers retire, leave because of personal reasons, nothing to do with the job, nothing to do with rates of pay, nothing to do with terms and conditions. And there will always, in any business, obviously, as you know, there will always be an element of that. At the moment, it is incredibly difficult to staff up. And the guys on the ground, from the guys and girls doing the street cleaning, emptying the bins, the street litter bins to the waste grounds, they do a fantastic job. And they are working really, really hard. Supervisors and managers equally are working very hard, dealing with different challenges every day. So, for example, the last 2 days, we've had 5 people absent through COVID. We just have to deal with that, but we don't have the level of surplus people that we would normally want to have to be able to cover that off easily. So the turnover rate is probably balanced at the moment, I would say.
And we've had, in the last 2 months, as Steve alluded to, we've had 3 people leave. one was retirement and two for other reasons. And in that same period, we have managed to bring on through an agency with a view to them becoming permanent, because obviously 12 weeks, etc. We have to remove the agency 8 drivers. So we are currently in credit, if you will, but obviously, that is to fill vacancies which are already existing. So there are green shoots, but it's still not quite running one out. We're not seeing people breaking down the door to come and work for us.
Another quick question. What level of agency staffing? I recognise, you're saying it's fluid. What sort of level of agency staffing and average are you working with?
Currently or ideally?
Well, both. Give us an idea.
Ideally, we'd like that percentage to be as low as possible, because we know we get better ownership of the service and the job and the quality and the safety and everything else that goes with it with direct employees. Average agency levels probably on a normal contract, normal time, 10%.
I would say here, without doing very quick maths, I would say you're talking 40% of our staff are currently agency.
So you'd want to work on 10, but you're working on 40.
Yes. But that is purely because we go through the process of having them through the agency for 12 weeks. So they are almost from day one full-time employees, but with agency paymasters, if you like, and then they will transition to us. We have been using those people over, and in the last few weeks, we've moved about 30 plus people over to full-time employees. Again, we're trying to do that a little bit sympathetically with the people, because they will be moving from weekly pay to monthly pay. So we are sitting down with those almost on an individual basis, and at what point does it best suit you? Just anecdotally, there's a married couple, one of them who's moved over already, one who's not going to move over to the 1st of January, so they keep one salary moving forward. So again, we're trying to do it sympathetically, but we are getting them as full-time employees.
Yeah, just two more. You didn't respond to Councillor Brailsdale when he said how many driver's loaders did you initially decide would be required when you took on the contract or when you were pitching for the contract. You've given an indication of 55 drivers and 98 operatives. Is that, is that what you decided you required, and are you considering that you need more than that?
I did answer Councillor Frizzle's question that I couldn't provide the numbers. So what I said was I don't have the numbers to hand. I'm happy to respond later. The 55 and the 98 is what we need today now to deliver the service as it's being delivered now.
As it's being delivered now, excluding the brown collection.
No, they are brown.
Right. Okay. Fine.
Can I just cover? You mentioned about -3 and +5. What period did that cover? Was that recently?
That's in the last 2 months.
That's the last 2 months.
So -3 and +8.
So in the last 2 months, then you've managed to increase the drivers by a net figure of 2. Yeah, but sorry, -3 +5. Oh, sorry, it was so 5. Yeah. So in 2 months, 5. So you're still looking for 15 drivers. If it's 5 in 2 months, so if you go at that pace, it's going to be 6 months before you're up to the required number of drivers.
Mathematically, the analysis is correct.
So it's going to be on your current performance. It's going to be another 6 months before you're up to speed with the required number of drivers.
Mathematically, yes, but it doesn't follow that past performance is going to be reflected in the future.
Okay. Yeah, I have 3 very quick questions.
I've got Councillor Rowe wants to ask, but can you make them quick?
It is very quick. You said in your presentation that you'll be presenting to offices in the near term. What's near term?
Well, that requires us to finish the piece of work and then agree with officers the date when we can convene to review it. It's imminent.
Within the next week, 2 weeks? I prefer some clarity around it rather than.
Yeah.
We've seen stretching from June, June, July, and it seems to stretch.
I understand that. We are on the home stretch, and I don't want to give a date because I can't commit on behalf of availability on the officers.
Okay. Another quick one. Are you looking at the service levels, and obviously people are focusing on waste and the collections? Have been focusing over the summer, officers know this, on street sweeping, toilet cleaning, all the other services you provide. Are you content, happy with the delivery of that service? And I will qualify this by saying that the majority of the staff that have been doing the toilet cleaning, certainly in my area, and doing the bin emptying have been superb. And you've got some excellent staff there who are very dedicated, care about it, and they're the type of staff that you need to retain. And they have, gone above and beyond, I think, in a lot of cases in what they've done, and perhaps aren't that well recognised for what they have been doing. But do you believe you're delivering on the other services, or do you believe that they've been impacted and there is a shortfall? I think particularly in areas such as street sweeping, where you've got drivers who are handling, driving the big mechanicals and the smaller mechanicals, and I see a shortfall in my area, certainly.
I think the answer to that question is that the first question you asked is, am I happy? And the answer is no, I'm not happy, because we know we are falling short in certain areas. We will debate the reasons why, but we would accept that we are falling short. So no, I'm not happy. Have we delivered the street cleansing service over the summer? I think there have been periods when it's been very good, and there have been periods where it hasn't been as good. So it's been a bit intermittent, I think, is how I would describe that.
I'd say extremely intermittent. But those that have delivered it have done a good job, but it's been...
Councillor, I agree with you on that. I think we've got some excellent people.
Just to pick up on the point about remuneration, should we say? I will check. I believe certain that as the increase of the OGV drivers, it did highlight some issues, and we have revised some of those drivers' pays, etc., upwards, because they were they had transferred over to a sort of rate of pay which wasn't the same at the same level as other people that hadn't been picked up. So we have corrected that.
Okay, Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I'm going to go back to when this super recycling system was introduced, because I'd like to know why you didn't introduce the new system in one total area, parish or whatever, instead of we got, well, in my area anyway, we've got half the street on the new system and the other half on the old system still. And it's very confusing. You've got lorries and the drivers who we've got sending two lots out to do virtually the same job, because one lot's still on the old system, the other's on the new system. If you'd had all areas on the new system or staying on the old system at a time, you wouldn't need as many lorries or as many drivers, because you've got one lot running around after another lot. And in where I live, we've got one lot of collections on Monday and another lot on Tuesday, and very often on the recycling in the old system of plastic bags this week or this last week, we were lucky enough that the bags that should have been picked up on Monday, Tuesday actually got picked up on Saturday, by which time people have been ringing me up saying what's going on yet again is, are we never going to get our collection on the right day? And as members, I think we've taken a lot of the flak, and I reckon that most of us have probably received 10, 20 complaints some days, and indeed some weeks. We get complaints all the time, and I just don't understand why you couldn't have introduced the same system in each parish or ward in the same area, because it would have been a hell of a lot easier for the people who live there and for your guys. If the people who introduced the system decided where they were going to go, they consulted the local ward members, because we're the people on the ground. We know where some of the big lorries obviously can't get down some of the smaller streets, But some of the streets where they're not going, they could get down ever so easily. In my street alone, we've got 2 separate collections. I really don't know why. So perhaps you can enlighten me as to how the system was introduced and why it is and where we are now and when are we going to receive a recovery plan that will tell us exactly what's going to happen. Thank you.
I'll try and answer that in terms of the questions I think that you've asked. In terms of the plan, already detailed to Councillor Long earlier, that work is in progress, almost complete, but very well advanced, and that will follow. In terms of the way the system was introduced, it was never designed, as you will be apparent to you, around parish boundaries or ward boundaries. And there was never any consultation with councillors on that. And as I explained to the leader of the council at the time, we wouldn't have expected to have done that in any course of event, to have consulted with individual councillors. And we wouldn't normally introduce it on ward or parish boundaries. So that, what we've done is the way that we would approach it. It doesn't, I understand the frustrations that you've got, believe me, I do, but we wouldn't do it that way, and we just wouldn't.
Wouldn't it have been a lot easier to do it like that, though? Then why wouldn't you do it?
Because what we looked for was the most efficient way of designing the whole service.
Well, it's certainly not very efficient, is it? Well, I stick there.
Okay. Right. I'm doing committee members first, and then I'll go to non-committee members. I've got Councillor Callahan, I've got Councillor Spencer, and I've got Councillor McCann. Councillor Callahan.
Yeah, I think the public will be somewhat surprised to hear that you don't accept that you're underprepared. This is contract, you know, vehicles too big for the road. You know, we've been through it several times, had lots of meetings like this. You know, routes not checked properly, depots not big enough. I mean, these are basic errors. I mean, the shortage of drivers that you've talked about at length is a bit of a gift for you because, you know, it covers a multitude of sins, in my opinion. And the problems inherent in this particular area were very evident before the driver shortage. So that's a bit of a smokescreen in my view. And I think it's a disservice to residents to say that you don't accept you're underprepared, because it's been causing all of us an awful lot of grief. Residents, councillors, staff at the council trying to deal with all these problems, which were here in great abundance before the driver shortage. So, you know, we just keep having meeting after meeting, and things do not seem to improve. My question is, specific question being, and I'm quite glad to have the opportunity to ask questions, because I was very surprised to find at the beginning that FCC were not going to deal directly with councillors or with the public, only with 2 named senior members of the council officers. Now, in my view, that's no way to be democratic and to run a very basic public service. So, you know, you get layers and layers of bureaucracy, which is not a good thing straight away from the offing. So I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to ask you a question, but I mean, it's, as Councillor Long said, it's to do slightly not, been over and over the recycling, but the latest complaints I've had from Kingsbridge, apart from the recycling, and people not knowing what group they're in. There's these 3 groups. People don't even know what group they're in. They don't know what commingling means. They have no idea why the food caddy, whether it has to go in the black bin or it doesn't. So it's just created an awful lot of problems for everybody. The fact you've got these 3 different systems. But apart from that, my question, apart from recycling, is that after 2 years, the street bins in the centre of Kingsbridge were washed. Great, you know, the town council was very pleased because they've got the system of street furniture that they want to have that's very distinctive. Photos were sent to me of the bins after, I thought it was before they'd been cleaned, but it turns out they were after they'd been cleaned. Now, you mentioned that staff are working very hard, but I'm sure they do, but in this particular instance, there was like mud and dirt all over the bins from like the bottom up, and they did not look clean at all. And now this is a very basic service, and I would have thought this should have been checked, or somebody should come back, or, you know, it just, and I don't think it's an issue of drivers, it's just a basic getting basic service correct for the community. And so I'd like to bring that up here because I don't have the opportunity.
Can we please have your question?
Yeah,
This is not for speeches, it's for questions.
Why?
So please, can you ask a question?
Why, when you have a service basically like cleaning bins, are they not cleaned?
It is, Councillor, I'm sure you will understand, very difficult for me to respond in an informed way on a specific incident which you've raised. I'm guessing that you would have raised it at the time through officers and then through the system to us, and we can deal with it at the time. I can't respond to that. I'm sorry. It's in the minutiae. It's important. It's important in terms of me understanding which bins, which day, which crew were servicing them. I can't possibly respond to that today.
It's just
Thank you. Councillor Spencer.
Thank you. I have got a couple of comments. I do have a question as well.
Can we please keep questions just rather than speeches? Yes.
Well, I just want to correct our colleague here, because you have no perception of what a councillor is faced with when trying to sit in front of a parish council or a resident. Please don't tell us you have any perception of what that means, because I don't think there's a single councillor around the table here who hasn't been inundated with verbal abuse because of the system which we appear to have no control over. So that's my view there. In terms of my residents, and I represent a very rural ward, my residents only want to know one thing: when are their bins going to be collected? So I'll put that to you, question now, here, now. Tell us today when our bins are going to be collected according to the original signed contract. When is it going to happen? That's all I want to know. You haven't mentioned residents once in your speech. Oh, you mentioned them once. Sorry, you did mention them once. We mention them every single sentence we utter. So when are my residents' bins going to be collected?
When are they scheduled to be collected?
Last week, last month, last year. Some of them waiting 5 and 6 weeks for collection. You get consistent missed collections or non-collections. When are we going to get the super recycling service that we signed up for? When is that going to happen? There's only one answer.
I've given this answer already to other councillors around the table. It's not possible for me to say today when that service will be fully installed across the entire district.
Any part of the district? No, it's not.
Okay, I think we've, Councillor McCarthy.
Okay, a few of my questions have been answered, but I'm intrigued by this 5598 closures. You say that is what you need now to currently use a service that would be stable, if you can call it that, using compactor lorries and etc., not actually implementing the full recycling. Is that correct?
Not quite, Councillor. That's to deliver the service as it stands today. So that's the refuse service, the garden waste service, and the recycling service as it is currently configured across the district. That is
okay. Well, that includes the compactor lorries, etc. Therefore, yes. Yes? Yes. Okay. I mean, as has been suggested, this saga has been going on long before the driver shortage occurred, and I mean, it even started going wrong when the ground changes started. And it was evident at that stage that not sufficient research had been done about the routes. People hadn't driven the routes. The wrong trucks were being sent. They just couldn't go down those roads. It was fairly shambolic. And you said earlier that although you've got 66 authorities in your portfolio, only 12 of those you do collections for. Can I ask how many of those you've actually had to go through the process of migrating a service, as you have been doing here at?
Some of those contracts we've held since 1990, so they would have gone through several different iterations of service changes. Some of them are recent contracts about to go through service changes. I'm thinking at some stage, most of them, and pretty soon all of them will have gone through some kind of service change.
Okay, well, so there's two sides to that answer. I mean, had you said, no, we hadn't done it at all, then I would have said, well, you clearly didn't have the experience and that might explain why things were going wrong. But on the basis of your answer, you do have the experience, so I still don't understand why you allowed this to go so incredibly wrong. And I mean, even now, I'm getting, missed collections. I had a whole village missed the other day. And it would appear that South Hams are told by FCC that bins have been put out. And so it gets logged by the council as being the fault of the residents. When in fact, residents are coming to me and saying they've been out there for 6 weeks, but nobody's picked them up. So how, I don't understand how that lack of communication, the inability to work with the council in any sensible way whereby this information flow takes place and missed collections can be dealt with properly. Why is this still, because this has been going on for so long now, why is this still an issue? Well, that's the first question. And the other question I would have is, why are we having so many missed bin collections at all? Why is it still happening?
I mean,
I appreciate you've got a shortage of drivers, but that doesn't really, I don't think sufficiently explains why you're missing them in the first place.
Okay, I mean, there are 2 points there. I mean, there are missed bins, and we do have meetings on a daily basis where I suppose missed bins is absolutely the correct term, but there are bins that we know that we haven't collected for one reason or another. For instance, yesterday we had a crew come back, been out for an hour, but they were some of the people who had to go and get COVID tested. So we knew that those rounds weren't going to be completed. We do share that information. So yes, they are missed bins to the resident, but I know it's very much, but we knew that wasn't going to happen because we didn't have the resource to do that. We are working with the crews on those ones where they are saying it's not out, because they are more individual instances. And we are working with the crews on those, but with a 40% makeup of agency, as we said earlier, there is a lot of training that goes on there, and we have to stay on top of those. But that is improving, in my opinion. Yours may be different, but it is difficult because there are areas that we know we cannot get to. There are rounds that on a daily basis we know we're not going out because we don't have a driver for them. Today we haven't got a round go out. Tomorrow that round will be available. But as I say, that information is shared, and as I believe it is put on the website. So those villages that we meet, that we miss, they should be able to be aware of that. And then when we do that, we do try and get those crews out at the weekend to try and catch up those properties. So that's the question that was earlier about really the resources. We do get crews out to do those during the weekend.
Do you want a supplementary to that?
I just, although I hear the words you're saying, I mean, they do sound a bit limp to me. I really don't understand. I mean, clearly, this isn't just human error where you've got consistently, I mean, one particular household just recently, I mean, and this is just a recent example, they hadn't been picked up for 6 weeks, and presumably consistently, this has been reported back to FCC and then back to South Hams as just being bins not out. How can I find that hard to understand. You can't just explain it on the lack of training. Some of these houses aren't sort of built, aren't sort of disappeared down some long lane. I mean, you're actually driving past these bins in the road.
If you can get the specifics like that, if you can get the details over to me, I can have a look at them. I can't answer. I don't know what that house is. I don't know.
Well, I'm not asking you to get into it, but this is not an isolated example. I'm sure everybody around the table here could cite similar examples. And it's just, I just don't understand why there is this. But I mean, you've got officers embedded, in quotes, from the council with your teams. I mean, why we need to do that is it begs a question in itself. But that's not the case anymore.
Not particularly. We have 2 officers who are effectively still carrying out collections. Is that correct? So we've still got 2 of our team who are actually going out in vans collecting where either FCC are unable to get or picking up missed collections that we prioritise based on complaints. In terms of embedded, we have daily calls with FCC every morning where we review previous day's performance and challenge FCC in terms of whether we believe that performance is true, accurate reflection. For example, what you mentioned about properties that are being sold at the property that the bins weren't out. So we have those challenges with FCC, and Brian and Sarah tend to be on those calls every day discussing the previous day's issues and whether FCC are in a position to get all the rounds out. So that happens on a daily basis, and then we have weekly reviews in terms of the overall. And at the same time, of course, the executive are talking almost weekly to Steve and Brian.
Okay, can we move on? Right, have all committee members asked questions? If they have, I'll move on to the only one non-committee member who hasn't want to ask. Councillor Hopwood, do you want to ask a question?
Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to. Yeah, I just picked up on something, Mr. Longdon, you said in your introduction, and you said you took on a service with council employees going to the private sector, super recycling service being introduced and round reviews. You chose to introduce the round reviews, and I just, as an executive, we have pushed you week after week about the failure of the round review and how it is not working, and you have yet, in fact, you won't acknowledge that. I don't know why you're persisting with it, and you've got to acknowledge the failure is not down to COVID. It's not been helped by COVID. It's not been helped by a shortage of FCC drivers, but actually the failure of delivery to our residents, who we all represent, is down to FCC. And on a weekly basis, as an executive, we question you and we try and drill down into what is happening, why things are happening. No different to what members are doing today, and week in, week out, we actually get the same lame answers that we've got today, which actually don't give any further information. It's like extracting teeth if you're not a dentist. It flipping hurts, you know, because all we want as members is a service for our residents. As an executive, we get an email every morning of round mobilisations, and I was delighted. Monday, Tuesday and today of this week, you've had all rounds out collecting, which is great. Putting garden waste aside, which I can't even think to talk about. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday this week, you've had people off sick, staff absences, but you still managed to get full rounds out, which is brilliant. However, you're still missing bins. Why cannot an environmental service such as FCC just do its basic fundamental job and collect bins and not miss any? Once again, it's something that we've spoken to you about from day one as an executive. It's lack of management on the ground. And until you sort round reviews out and the management on the ground of actually some pretty damn good people collecting refuse, who I do get a lot of comments about, Mostly good, sometimes bad, but mostly on the whole good. But until you sort your management out on the ground and your round reviews, we're not going to go any further. I'd just like to know, with a full complement, Monday, Tuesday, can't give today's figures obviously, Monday and Tuesday, do you have the figures about how many bids you've missed? Because with full teams out, we shouldn't have missed any bids. And as a council, that's what we expect. We expect we're always going to have some bids missed, but actually, as a council, I would expect all bids to be collected Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday this week, with very few misses. Do you have the information on how many bids you've missed, please, Monday, Tuesday of this week?
Don't have it on us.
Mrs. Moody, do you have it?
I think you mentioned Councillor Hotwood. So currently this week, Monday, Tuesday, as you've alluded to, we don't actually receive today's figures till tomorrow. But from the weekend, there's been 123 customer reported missed and 585 of which FCC they weren't able to complete this week.
Would you like to comment on those figures that have just been given? Would you like to repeat the figures again?
No, I'm sorry, Councillor. I heard the numbers. Somebody else say something. We have explained the reasons why sometimes the rounds don't complete. They might go out, but as we said yesterday, we had a crew go out, all came back after an hour because they had to go for COVID testing. So it's those type of instances which lead to the fact that we don't complete rounds. We have this conversation, as Councillor Hotwood rightly says, on an almost weekly basis. We have a different view to Councillor Hotwood, and Councillor Hotwood understands that. We don't agree on this, and we're probably not going to agree.
Right.
Can I just, sorry, because what I'm sorry, can I just ask Mrs. Moody, as a supplementary to that, just, Mrs. Moody, because we usually on a Wednesday morning, we would receive an email of Hayley Duffy to tell us actually that one crew was only out for an hour yesterday. And I didn't get anything this morning to say that one crew came back early yesterday. In fact, one crew came back after 1 hour. Why was that?
I'll have to check that, Councillor Hotwood. I wasn't on this morning's update. I was at SLT, but I can certainly feed that back.
Lovely, thanks.
I can say that RC7 was delayed due to issue tipping food.
That was today.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a question from Councillor Taylor, who is on through Teams.
For FCC's benefit, we've got members who were wanting to listen to this session who were on remote. So, Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. Actually, Councillor Hopgood's put most of my points as well, but it's FC, they haven't answered whether they're going to review the rounds, because common sense tells me that if they use the drivers better rather than just rolling into a village and missing streets, they wouldn't have a recollection. And the other question is, what are they doing about looking after their crew members? Because when they collected ours last week, you had one guy that was chasing all the bins with one lorry, which is slowing everything up. Now, that doesn't seem to make sense to me. So that's my two questions, really. Are they going to review the rounds? Because that desperately needs doing to improve. And the other thing is, what are they doing about crews? Because they don't need HGVs. Thank you.
So the answer, Councillor, to your first question is the piece of work that we've been looking at is looking at everything. And it's based around the data that we're collecting off the curbside, and we haven't ruled anything in or ruled anything out, as it were. So we will present that to officers in due course, as we've said several times this afternoon. The point we make around the crew member is that it depends on in theory, whether that was supposed to be one loader or two will depend upon the type of collection, the size of the vehicle and where it was. If it was intended to be one, then it's absolutely correct. If it was intended to be two, the fact that they're out there with one probably means that we are unable on that day to crew it with two, and it's better to go out with a driver one and to not send the round out at all.
Yeah, this is a large recycling lorry, and this guy he ran for like 200 yards, I think, trying to keep up with the lorry. So I didn't think he was going to stick that, and no wonder you won't keep the staff at that rate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So next is Councillor Foss. Councillor Foss, you've got a question?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It's been a very interesting but disappointing reaction we've had. I want to ask a question of FCC. Have they actually, the bosses, got out of the office, gone out with the guys and seen what their problems are, rather than just relying on statistics that they get back on their laptops and whatever? Because they need to go out and talk to them and see what the problems are, because there is no, what I can see, nothing between the bosses and the workers, other than you do what you're told and you don't listen to the workers at all. And I'm sorry, but I think you need to get out and have a look around and see what is going on, rather than relying on electronics.
Your question?
I asked, have they been out there?
Right, okay.
The short answer to that is yes, we have. Yes, we do. And yes, we do listen to the crews when they come back. All the crews are debriefed when they come back in off the rounds. And whenever I'm down, I make a point of speaking to them. I've been out on the area. I know, Brian, you do this regularly. So the answer, Councillor Foss, is yes, we do.
Just as a quick aside, you said whenever you're down. How often do you come?
I would say that's about once a month at the moment.
Okay. Okay. Right, I think we've finished now as far as questions. Has any member got a burning desire to ask a final question? Shall we move on and thank the gentleman from FCC for coming along and answering our questions and giving a report. So unless there's anything more, thank you very much indeed, gentlemen. Thank you.
Cheryl Williams, FCC.
Can I suggest that we have a 10-minute break so that we can, before moving on to the next item on the agenda? Councillor Brazil.
Yes, and I'm going to have to go at 5, I'm afraid.
Right. So 5 minutes break then. Right. So the next session, we think we need to pass that. So I'd like to propose that from the chair.
Yeah, I'll second
All agree?
Yes.
Okay. Right. So presumably there are no cameras rolling, and FCC no longer on the premises.
No, FCC